You seductive fox, don't think, just because you climbed into the Crown Prince's bed, that you can secure a foothold here in the Eastern Palace. I am telling you, as long as I live, you will always be nothing but a low-class scheming little mistress.
Jiang Lanxin's hand whipped through the air and slapped hard across my face. I didn't dodge. I took the slap fully. Half of my face instantly burned with a searing pain. She is the Crown Princess, is the one the Crown Prince holds closest to his heart. Their lifelong exclusive devotion to each other is a beautiful tale celebrated throughout the entire capital, while I am the one everyone despises as the home-wrecking third party, the wicked woman who ruined their love. But the harder she slapped my face, the deeper the smile grew in my heart. She cursed my beauty, cursed my seductiveness, and cursed my unscrupulous methods. Heh. But she will never know that I don't love that hypocritical crown prince at all. I approached him, pleased him, and even spared no expense to enter the Eastern Palace under a barrage of curses, but it was never to steal her man. The snow in the 12th lunar month seemed as if it wanted to bury the entire capital. I crouched behind our drafty wooden door, rubbing my purple, frozen hands for the 12th time. Today was the day my eldest sister, Ayua, was to leave the palace. The year she entered the palace, I was only 3 years old. In my memory, my sister always carried the sweet scent of osmanthus cake. Sister often wrote in her letters that she had saved up some money, and once she left the palace, she would buy me 2 new goose yellow padded coats, and buy father and mother a new straw hat that wouldn't leak rain. Here it comes.
Is that the carriage from the palace?
In father's cloudy eyes, a glimmer of light appeared. A dilapidated, green-roofed carriage stopped at the entrance of the village. There were no firecrackers and no warm greetings. Several young eunuchs, wearing dusty drab clothes, jumped down. With rough movements, they threw onto the ground something wrapped in a tattered straw mat.
Lu Xiyue, with a wicked mind, and attempted to seduce the Crown Prince. She was caught in the act by Her Highness the Crown Princess. In consideration of her years of service, her body was left intact. Take her away.
The leading eunuch brushed his hands in disgust into father's arms. He threw a piece of broken silver.
Let's go.
The silver fell into the snow. Before I could even see it clearly, the carriage sped away. My sister's hands, which could once embroider 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix, had their fingernails crammed with dark red dirt. Around her neck was a purplish strangulation mark. She had clearly been strangled to death.
Sister.
I threw myself forward and held her tightly, just like when we were little, and she would hold me in her arms.
My dear Yue. My dear Yue.
Father, please don't leave.
Heaven and earth fell silent, leaving only the howling wind and snow. I held them, kneeling in the snow all night long. My tears ran dry, my voice grew hoarse, and my heart died. That day, with eyes swollen from crying, I buried all my loved ones with my own hands. I sold everything I owned to buy my way into the palace. The moment I pressed my fingerprint onto the deed of sale, I made up my mind that I would find the murderer who killed my sister and my father. I will have my revenge. But I never would have imagined that the moment I stepped through the palace gates, my life would be completely changed forever, starting as a lowly maid who washed the palace latrines. I learned to hide my murderous intent behind the most submissive smile. Later, a palace maid from my village told me a spine-chilling truth. The Crown Princess Jiang Lanxin, in order to test the Crown Prince's vow of one couple for a lifetime, deliberately chose my honest sister to serve him tea. Yet the Crown Prince Mu Changfeng, to prove his devotion, actually stood by and let the old governess rush into the study and strangle my sister to death. This royal couple's deep and beautiful love was actually a stage built. My sister's bones built into a stage. Until 6 years later in the Phoenix Palace, the Empress was frowning in deep worry because the Crown Prince had no heir. Just at the critical moment, when she fainted from the heat, I yawned. I rushed to fetch the imperial physician at a pace so frantic and ran as fast as I could to fetch the imperial physician. But then, physician's son, whom I had already, using 3 years of my savings, imperial physician's son, whom I had bribed, dangled the bait on the spot.
Your ladyship, your health is not in serious danger. I will prescribe some medicine to nurture your body. However, this young lady has an auspicious constitution for childbearing and is highly likely to conceive.
The Empress's finger guards gently tapped on the table. In the next second, I soon found myself wearing, in a delicate pink sheer gown, moved into the side hall of the Eastern Palace. The door was violently kicked open, reeking of alcohol. He pinched my chin hard, forcing me to look up at him. He called me pathetic. He ordered me to get off the bed and sleep on the freezing brick floor, declaring that this bed would never hold any second woman on it. Who would have thought? I did not cry or make a scene. I simply and submissively laid out my bedding on the floor. Next, I reminded him in a low voice that outside the window, the Empress's people eavesdropping outside. Your Highness, there is someone outside the window. To secure his position as the Crown Prince, Mu Changfeng could only grit his teeth and roll around on the bed, making loud, rustling noises. Listening to the man on the bed, spouting hypocritical, affectionate lies, I laughed until tears came to my eyes. So what if he is the master of the Eastern Palace? In the end, he still has to beg, like a dog, between power and love. At dawn the next day, Nanny Chin came to collect the consummation cloth. Mu Changfeng, impeccably dressed, stood to the side, his eyes full of mockery, waiting to see how I would handle the situation. To his surprise, I rose calmly, turned my back to him, and without hesitation, placed my right index finger into my mouth, biting down hard. The sharp pain of biting my own finger pierced straight to my heart. Without changing my expression, I let the drops of blood fall onto the white silk and handed it out the door. In return, Nanny Chin, beaming with joy, presented me with a pure gold butterfly hairpin holding a pearl. Mu Changfeng let out a cold snort, calling me hypocritical and lowly, saying I could never compare to Jiang Lanxin's openness and integrity. Humbly, I pressed my forehead against the cold brick floor, agreeing with him repeatedly. Yes, Your Highness is correct in your lecture, but in my heart I sneered. She can afford to be open because someone else is taking the blows for her. If I weren't hypocritical, I would have long since become nothing but dirt in a mass grave. After dressing and doing my hair, I headed to the main courtyard to pay my respects to the Crown Princess. Your humble concubine, Lady Lu, pays respects to Her Highness, the Crown Princess. I performed the formal salutation with strict propriety, resting my forehead against the back of my hands, ensuring my posture is completely flawless.
I heard the Crown Prince stayed at your place last night.
Jiang Lan did not tell me to rise. In her voice, there was a trace of hatred, as if she were gritting her teeth. I knelt on the ground. I did not answer.
Lady Liang, since you have entered the Eastern Palace, you must learn the rules. Why haven't you served tea to Her Highness yet?
I took the teacup with both hands, shuffled forward on my knees, and raised it high above my head. Please have some tea, Your Highness. Jiang Lan cast her eyes down, staring at my fair, delicate hands, and suddenly let out a cold sneer. With a flip of her jade-like hand, a full cup of tea was squarely and completely poured over my head. Tea leaves clung to my long eyelashes, leaving me in a wretched state.
My little dear, Brother Mu told me long ago that he hasn't even touched you. You'd better stop putting on that seductive, favored act. In my entire life, what I detest the most is a homewrecker like you who ruins other people's relationships. You'd better give up on those wicked ideas.
I kept my head bowed, letting the cold tea trickling down the chin. Born into the royal family, love and affection have always been mere accessories to power. When beauty fades, love diminishes. When benefits end, affection dies. To tether one's life and destiny, tethered to a man's love, is like dancing on the edge of a blade, while still pridefully boasting of one's graceful steps. Just then, From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse outside the palace doors. At the corner of the carved corridor, where a flash of striking blue appeared, it was Mu Changfeng. He has returned from court. In a flash, I suddenly straightened my back, and instead of wiping the tea from my face, I heavily kowtowed right next to the shattered porcelain pieces. Please forgive me, Crown Princess. It was my own clumsiness. I accidentally knocked over the teacup. If this tea splashed your highness and harmed your precious body, your lowly servant would deserve 10,000 deaths. As I spoke, I hurriedly used my sleeve to wipe the spilled tea from the floor, deliberately letting my shoulders shiver violently from fear and cold. Jiang Lanxin was, by my sudden fit of madness, startled and was just about to lose her temper.
What kind of act are you putting on here?
What is going on?
Mu Changfeng strode into the hall, his gaze falling and landed on me. At this moment, I was kneeling amidst the scattered mess on the floor, soaked through and through. My dress clung tightly to me, revealing a frail and pitiful figure. I pursed my lips tightly, deliberately letting my eyes turn red as tears welled up in them, yet stubbornly refusing to let them fall. I put on the perfect display of someone who was bullied, but too afraid to speak up. Mu Changfeng's steps suddenly came to a halt. He looked at the overbearing and furious Jiang Lanxin, and then looked back at me, kneeling on the ground. In that instant, I keenly captured a flicker, a complex emotion. In the depths of Mu Changfeng's eyes, I knew it wasn't love. It was the natural, condescending pity that those in high power, and condescending pity, though this pity was faint. For me, it was already enough to crack this seemingly indestructible, one and only lifelong devotion. That cup of cold tea ultimately became the fuse that triggered the very first fight between Mu Changfeng and Jiang Lanxin.
Lanxin, you are being too presumptuous.
Mu Changfeng frowned deeply, looking at me, soaked and shivering with fear, and kneeling in the middle of the hall. His tone carried a hint of the Crown Prince's authority.
This is someone the Empress Dowager just bestowed upon us. On her very first day, you humiliate her like this. Once word gets out, how will people gossip about the Eastern Palace? How will they gossip about you? The Crown Princess being so fiercely jealous.
Jiang Lanxin's eyes widened in utter disbelief. She stood up abruptly, the ruby tassel hairpin in her hair swaying violently.
Brother Mu, you're yelling at me? You are actually yelling at me over a lowly concubine. Clearly, she was the one who didn't hold the teacup steady. She did it on purpose, to play victim in front of you. Are you blind? Can't you see through her tricks?
Shut up. I only see you being overbearing, utterly lacking the grace of a crown princess. Lady Lu, why haven't you excused yourself yet? Go change into clean clothes. Have you not embarrassed yourself enough?
Please calm yourself, Your Highness. Please appease your anger, Your Majesty. It is all my fault. I shall return to Xiyue Pavilion now to reflect on my mistakes so as not to upset your ladyship any further. With that said, supported by Chu Chan, I stumbled out of the main courtyard. The moment I turned around, my eyes, which had been filled with terror, became like a ripple in stagnant water, giving rise to an extremely cold smile. The seed had been planted. The more Jiang Lanxin behaved like a firecracker, going off at the slightest spark, the more Mu Changfeng would feel that her face was repulsive. I couldn't help but think to myself, men are always like this. Compared to their lover's loyalty, they care far more about whether their authority is being challenged. Because of the argument in the main courtyard that day, Mu Changfeng seemed as though to make a statement to Jiang Lanxin, or perhaps to report back to the Empress. Every 3 to 5 days, he would visit my Xiyue Pavilion. However, every time he came, he would only sit on the daybed in the outer room, drink half a cup of tea, flip through a couple of pages of a book, and never stay the night, nor would he say a single word to me. I was more than happy to have the peace and quiet, and never tried to force my way into his presence, always staying quiet and still, keeping to my corner and doing my needlework, making myself like a shadow with no presence at all. In the blink of an eye, the 12th lunar month arrived, bringing the second heavy snowfall. That afternoon, the snow was falling heavily, goose feather-like flakes, completely covering the red walls and green tiles, completely covered, draped in an old cloak. I took Chu Chan with me to the back garden.
My lady, the snow is falling too hard. We should head back.
Let me cut 2 more branches. This green calyx plum tree blooms the most vibrantly. Taking them back to put in a white porcelain vase will bring some life into the room. As I held several branches of wintersweet covered in ice and snow and pushed open the door to the autumn water pavilion, I couldn't help but freeze in surprise. The charcoal fire in the room was burning brightly. Mu Changfeng was sitting in front of my embroidery frame, idly playing with a dark blue silk thread. Hearing the movement, he turned his head away and looked at me, covered in snow and cradling the red plum blossoms. In his deep eyes there flashed a flicker of barely perceptible admiration, but quickly, that flicker of admiration was masked by his habitual arrogance. He let out a sneer.
The heavy snow is blocking the doors outside, yet you're in such high spirits. Just for these few broken branches, you've made such a mess of yourself. How utterly unsophisticated.
I didn't get angry either, but merely stood by the threshold, deliberately avoiding bringing the chill on my body into the inner chamber. Submissively, I curtsied. Your Highness is right to lecture me. I am of humble birth and have short-sighted vision. If I could follow this pattern to embroider a sachet, I suppose it would be wonderful. Mu Changfeng's gaze, following my words, fell upon the embroidery basket. There lay a half-embroidered sachet made of the finest Hangzhou silk. The color was a steady and reserved dark blue. The bamboo leaves I had outlined on it with silver thread were lifelike, with stitches so fine and dense that even ordinary embroiderers could not compare. His heart stirred slightly. Mu Changfeng's waist accessories had always been uniformly made, making standard accessories, and this dark blue was clearly a man's color. Whom I was embroidering this sachet for was self-evident. Mu Changfeng's Adam's apple bobbed slightly. Just as he was about to speak, I suddenly turned my body aside, covered my nose and mouth with a handkerchief, and sneezed heavily. Achoo! Chu Chan quickly stepped forward, taking the winter sweet from my hands, and unfastened my snow-dusted cloak, complaining with deep concern.
Forgive me, Your Highness. My lady insisted on braving the heavy snow to pick this winter sweet. She said those blooming in the snow have the most character. I couldn't stop her at all. Now look what happened. It is so windy outside. She must have caught a cold.
Your Highness, you have a precious, noble body. For the next few days, you should still avoid coming to my Chushui pavilion. I kept my head lowered, intentionally making my voice sound stuffed up and nasal, filled with self-reproach and an obvious sense of distance. A cold is highly contagious. If I pass the illness to Your Highness, I could never make amends even with 10,000 deaths. Please return quickly. With that said, I turned and instructed Chu Chan, go to the Imperial Academy of Medicine immediately and fetch some medicine to dispel the cold. If I drink it early, perhaps I can keep the illness at bay, lest it defile the Crown Prince's palace. Mu Changfeng looked at me, looking so utterly humble and lowly. The irritation in his heart actually began to grow wildly like weeds. He was used to Jiang Lanxin's aggressive and demanding ways, yet my current posture, where I dared not even steal a glance, as long as he remained safe, was just like a feather, gently yet noticeably scratching at his male vanity.
Even as a master, you still can't rid yourself of this lowly habit of serving others. On snowy days, stay indoors instead of going out and making a fool of yourself.
Yes, I will stop making this sachet then. The moment the words left my mouth, Mu Changfeng whipped his head around, glaring at me with fierce eyes.
In my Eastern Palace, there is no rule that allows for waste. Since the fabric has been cut, sew it to completion for me.
After saying this, he strode out into the wind and snow, his steps seeming even more hurried than when he had arrived. Watching his receding figure, I slowly straightened my back. I put away my handkerchief. There was no longer any trace of illness on my face. I casually snapped off a sprig of red plum blossoms. This flower grew too outstandingly. Its branches must be pruned before it is worthy of entering my vase. Sure enough, Mu Changfeng did not visit for 5 consecutive days. The charcoal supply was cut off, and my meals arrived cold. The servants began to treat me with cold disdain, yet I remained completely unbothered. It was not until the evening of the 6th day that Xiaokong, the chief maid of the main courtyard, arrived.
The Crown Princess shows her benevolence by granting Lady Shen evening dinner.
She is up to no good. My lady, let us pretend to be ill.
I chose a simple plain white dress that looked as fragile as if it would shatter in the wind, and adorned my hair with a single velvet flower. Being sick once shows compliance. Being sick twice would seem like affectation. Since the stage has been set for me, if I do not go, would I not let down her kind intentions? Stepping into the main courtyard, a warm fragrance greeted my senses. Mu Changfeng sat in the seat of honor, while Jiang Lanxin leaned against his shoulder. What a beautiful picture of marital bliss. I stepped forward and bowed down. Jiang Lanxin didn't even raise her eyelids, toyingly playing with her wine cup. Since you're here, let Xiao Kong teach you some rules. And today, you shall serve me and His Highness as we dine. A mere maidservant actually dared to order around a lady officially titled by the Emperor. I lowered my eyes submissively. Yes, to serve your Highness and Her Grace. Is this concubine's blessing? I stood there like a wooden mannequin, serving dishes and pouring wine, humbling myself to the absolute dust. But the more submissive I was, the more fiercely the fire in Jiang Lanxin's eyes burned. What she wanted was not my submission, but my utter humiliation.
Just eating dishes is tasteless. I want to drink that.
That was freshly stewed chicken soup. A thick layer of yellow oil floated on the surface, sealing all the boiling steam inside. I ladled a bowl of it and handed it over on a tray, but Jiang Lanxin didn't take it. With a half smile, she looked at Mu Changfeng.
Brother Mu, according to the customs of Mobei, hot soup must be held and offered with both hands to show proper respect, right?
Mu Changfeng swept a glance at me.
Lanxin is right.
From my elders, pinned me to the pillar of shame. I pulled back the tray, extended both hands, and directly held the scalding porcelain bowl. Hot. It was a piercing heat. In just a few breaths, my fingertips turned bright red, and then a frightening shade of purple. I bit my lip hard, big tears rolling down my face, my hands shaking violently. Your ladyship, please enjoy. Jiang Lanxin slowly and deliberately adjusted her sleeves, relishing my agony, making no move to take the bowl. Finally, I couldn't hold on any longer. My hands slipped, and half a bowl of boiling hot soup spilled directly onto the back of my hands. Only a few drops splashed onto the tips of Jiang Lanxin's shoes. In the next second, a gust of wind rushed toward me, and a sharp slap resounded through the room. Xiao Kong used all her strength to strike my face hard. I was knocked to the ground, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth, my ears ringing.
You useless thing. You can't even hold a bowl of soup. Were you trying to burn the crown princess on purpose?
Ignoring the raw, blistered flesh on my hands, I kowtowed frantically. I wouldn't dare, Your Highness. It was truly too hot. Please, Your Highness, see the truth. Half of my face was swollen high. Taking advantage of her mistress's power, Xiao Kong raised her hand to deliver a second slap.
Enough.
His face was dark with anger as he looked at me, trembling on the floor, and then at the arrogant mistress and maid. He didn't love me, but he would never allow a mere maid to slap the crown prince's face in public. This wasn't just slapping me. She was completely trampling the rules of the Eastern Palace underfoot.
Get back to Xiyue Pavilion, and no one is allowed to go look for trouble with her.
Late at night, Xiyue Pavilion. Chuchan wept as she popped my blisters. I looked into the mirror, yet I smiled at my red, swollen face. My eyes were bright, as if admiring a masterpiece I had crafted with my own hands. Being able to hold it is one thing, spilling it is quite another. If I hadn't spilled that bowl of soup, how could I have traded it for this slap? Without this slap, how would the crown prince ever know that his beloved darling is a shrew? Just as we were speaking, the little eunuch, Runzi, who was in charge of sweeping outside, quietly tapped on the window from the outside.
The crown prince and the crown princess had a massive argument. The crown prince even smashed his teacup.
Just as dawn broke the next day, the main door was kicked open. Jiang Lanxin, wearing the same red dress from last night, her eyes bloodshot, barged in with a hostile aura. She had clearly lost the argument and came to vent her anger on me.
Guai Guai, get your ass out here.
I hurriedly knelt down. Before he could finish speaking, a foot stepped hard on the back of my blister-covered hand. The pain broke me into a cold sweat. She bit her lower lip hard. Jiang Lanxin ground her foot down with force, causing blood to seep out. She let out a twisted laugh.
Ha ha ha. Don't think that just because Brother Mu protected you once, you can turn things around. In my eyes, you aren't even worthy of carrying my shoes.
This lowly concubine wouldn't dare. I willingly accept my punishment. The more I put on this submissive act, the more she hated it.
What a fine, willingly accept punishment. Then go kneel in the snow. Until my anger is appeased, you are not allowed to get up.
Chu Chan pleaded for mercy, only to be dragged away immediately, to be slapped 20 times. Listening to Chu Chan's agonizing screams, my fingernails dug deep into my flesh. Every single one of these debts, I have recorded them all. I dragged myself up, walking step by step into the swirling wind and snow, and knelt straight down. The freezing, melted snow instantly soaked through my knees. A bone-chilling cold seeped deep into the joints of my bones. To outsiders, I looked like I was shivering on the verge of collapse, on the verge of death, but who could have known? Even if the wind and snow were 10 times worse, to a lotus spirit like me, born in a lotus pond and raised in the waters, this was nothing more than a self-harm ruse used for my gambit. I had carefully calculated the time Mu Changfeng would dismiss court. And in this snowfield, I forced myself to kneel until I turned into an ice sculpture. After half an hour, my eyelashes frosted over, her face was deathly pale. I turned myself into a fragile glass doll that would shatter at any moment. Just then, footsteps echoed from the end of the corridor. Mu Changfeng, dressed in his court robes, walked over with long strides. At a single glance, he saw me kneeling in the snow, as well as Jiang Lanxin standing under the corridor, looking utterly smug.
What is going on here?
Brother Mu, she was sowing discord, so I punished her by making her kneel for a bit to teach her a lesson.
But this time, Mu Changfeng did not look at her at all. His gaze was glued tightly to me. I timed it perfectly, slowly raising my head, my eyes pooling with tears that were just about to fall. Your Highness, it is your concubine's fault. I didn't mean to make her ladyship angry. Before he could finish speaking, my body went limp, and I collapsed straight into the snow.
Impudent.
Mu Changfeng flung Jiang Lanxin aside and rushed over like mad, scooping me up in his arms. Nestled in his embrace, I felt as light as a feather and as cold as ice. He looked at the festering blisters on the back of my hand and at my badly swollen cheek. A towering rage instantly swept away his sanity.
Jiang Lanxin, have you made enough of a scene?
This roar left Jiang Lanxin utterly stunned. She widened her eyes in disbelief.
Brother Mu, you actually yelled at me. For the sake of a mere concubine, you promised me one life, one partner forever.
One life, one partner forever was not meant for you to use my promise, to treat human life like dust. Look at yourself now. Do you have even a shred of the Crown Princess's dignity left? Physician, summon the imperial physician immediately.
With that said, he carried me, and without looking back, rushed into Lu Xiyue Pavilion, bellowing for the physician, leaving Jiang Lanxin behind with nothing but the swirling snow and the tightly shut doors. I knew. At this very moment, she must be standing there, trembling with rage, cutting me to pieces in her mind. But what she didn't know, all of this was just the beginning. After Imperial Physician Sun's examination, he spoke of cold invading my body and damage to my very constitution, making Mu Changfeng's brow furrow deeply as he listened. Only after the physician withdrew did I pretend to slowly wake up. The moment I opened my eyes, I struggled to pay my respects, but Mu Changfeng gently held me down.
Lie still. Do not move. From now on, without my command, no one is allowed to touch you.
My tears fell like broken strings instantly, yet I shook my head desperately. Your Highness, please do not let a rift grow between you and Her Highness because of me. It is all my fault. The more sensible I appeared, the deeper the guilt grew in Mu Changfeng's eyes. He let out a sigh, tucked in the corners of my quilt.
Recover from your injuries in peace. You do not need to worry about anything else.
The moment the door closed, the fragility on my face vanished instantly, replaced instead by the ice-cold look deep in my eyes. Mu Changfeng, look at this. The more you protect me, the crazier Jiang Lanxin will get. And the crazier she gets, the more your affection for her will fade. Until in the end, this once divine couple will ultimately turn into a pair of bitter enemies. Who would have thought an even bigger bombshell was yet to come? Early the next morning, the door of Lu Xiyue Pavilion was pounded on with a deafening noise.
Your Highness, something terrible has happened. The Crown Princess has returned to Mobe. The Crown Princess left overnight with her guards. She said she would never return to this disgusting Eastern Palace.
After reading the letter, Mu Changfeng's face turned as pale as paper. Every word in the letter wept blood. Filled with utter determination, this man completely lost his mind. ignoring the empress's attempts to stop him and disregarding the criticism of the imperial court. He rushed out of the capital with a squad of personal guards, heading straight for Mobei to pursue his wife, a dignified heir to the throne, abandoning his duties for a woman. This was practically handing his political enemies ammunition on a silver platter. Naturally, I wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. In a single night, the crown prince's foolish reputation for loving beauties more than his kingdom spread through all the streets and alleys of the capital. The memorials from the censorate flew into the imperial study like snowflakes. The emperor was so enraged that he smashed his inkstone. Mu Changfeng's position as the heir began to totter. As for me, I immediately gave everyone a surprise. I was pregnant. Of course, it was fake. I am a lotus spirit. Controlling my own pulse is child's play.
Congratulations, my lady. Best wishes to you, my lady.
Even the head of the Imperial Academy of Medicine could not detect any flaw. When the Empress heard that I was pregnant, was absolutely overjoyed. Though her son is a fool, a grandchild was a solid hope. A continuous stream of rewards was sent into Chu Shui Pavilion. All kinds of tonics piled up like a mountain. I caressed my flat abdomen and looked at the room full of jewels and treasures and let out a cold laugh. This non-existent child would be the sharpest blade in my hand. A month later, the big show began. Mu Changfeng returned with Jiang Lanxin. The two rode in the same carriage, seemingly inseparable, as if their previous falling out had been mere lovers' play. The carriage stopped at the Eastern Palace gate. Mu Changfeng was carefully guarding her like a precious jewel, helping Jiang Lanxin step down. When he looked up and saw me, draped in a fox fur cloak, I rested my hand on my lower abdomen, smiling with gentle grace. Jiang Lanxin's smile instantly froze on her face. The resentment in her eyes practically overflowed.
Congratulations, Your Highness. Blessings to Your Highness. Our Lady Liangren is with child. It has been nearly 2 months.
Mu Changfeng froze for 3 seconds and then erupted into sheer ecstasy, leaving Jiang Lanxin behind. He rushed toward me.
Yin'er, is it true? I am to have an heir.
Imperial physician's son has confirmed it. Your humble consort has been waiting for Your Highness to return so I could share the joyful news.
Good, good. Very well.
Mu Changfeng was so excited, he was incoherent. He ordered rewards for the entire palace on the spot, completely forgetting about a pale-faced Jiang Lanxin standing behind him. I looked over Mu Changfeng's shoulder and smirked at Jiang Lanxin, a silent provocation. When we went to the imperial palace to report the news, the drama reached its climax. The Empress issued a decree on the spot promoting me to the rank of Liangdi. She even declared that as long as I give birth to the eldest son, the position of consort would be mine. The noble ladies of the court surrounded me with congratulations, while Jiang Lanxin stood in the corner, looking like a redundant joke, looking at her biting her lip until it bled. I felt a wave of pure satisfaction in my heart. But this was still not enough. Upon returning to the Eastern Palace, Jiang Lanxin went completely dark. She found every possible way to torment me, imposing strict rules, punishing me to kneel, and forcing me to copy Buddhist scriptures, resorting to every extreme measure. I accepted it all without complaint, never resisting. But every time I was punished, I would always manage to let Mu Changfeng run into me, run into my red, swollen knees, run into my trembling fingers, run into me being full of grievances, yet forcing a smile with each occurrence. Mu Changfeng's patience with Jiang Lanxin dwindled a bit more. Until today, when Chu Chan rushed into the room, her face full of excitement.
My lady, they are fighting in the main courtyard. The crown princess threw a teacup at His Highness and even cut his forehead.
He is doing very well. This wild horse from the northern desert has finally started to lash out. The wilder her tantrum, the colder Mu Changfeng's heart became. The sky of the Eastern Palace is about to collapse. As for me, have already, upon those ruins, prepared a grave for them. Have you ever seen someone carry a pregnancy while simultaneously plotting to make the child disappear? I was just worrying about how to resolve this fake pregnancy, yet Jiang Lanxin actually delivered herself right to me. Viewing flowers in the peony garden? That was clearly the guillotine she dug for herself. I gently caressed my flat stomach, my eyes cold and dangerous. I had been waiting for this day for far too long. Jiang Lanxin had been investigating my background like crazy, delving into my past, and finally found my original name, Lu Xiyue. My tragically deceased older sister, Lu Xiyue, was the one she used back then to test the crown prince. I had calculated every step just to doom her to eternal damnation. In the peony garden, the rare yellow and purple peonies bloomed in full glory. Jiang Lanxin, dressed in red, stood with her back to the lake, smiling eerily.
I thought Lady Lu wouldn't dare to come.
My body is indisposed, which kept your highness waiting.
You have quite the clever means. In half a year you rose from a palace maid to a lady, beguiling the crown prince into forgetting his vows. Ha ha ha.
I kept my head down in silence, letting her insult me, because I knew the real killer blow was yet to come. Jiang Lanxin leaned close to my ear, emphasizing each word.
Lu Xiyue, you entered the palace to seek revenge for your sister, Lu Xiyue, didn't you?
For 6 whole years. Finally, someone dared to speak my sister's name in front of me. Seeing my intense reaction, she laughed even more wildly.
That servant deserved to die. I only used her to test the crown prince, yet she actually dared to throw herself at him. She got what she deserved.
The hostility in my heart instantly surged like ocean waves. I jerked my head up. The meekness in my eyes completely vanished, leaving only a monstrous urge to kill. I tightly choked Jiang Lanxin's neck, forcing her backward step by step toward the lake. Jiang Lanxin's face turned flushed and bloated, yet a flash of cunning crossed her eyes. She was waiting for me to lose control and push her into the lake. Ha ha ha. But little did she know, I was far crazier than her. Just as she was preparing to fake her fall into the lake, I suddenly let go and leaned my body sideways. The freezing lake water instantly enveloped me. Sister, when you died, was it this cold too? I crushed the pouch of deer blood, and bright red blood instantly bloomed in the center of the lake. It was a horrific sight.
Help! The crown princess pushed the consort into the water. That is the crown prince's flesh and blood.
I didn't push her. She fell in on her own.
Seeing the lake filled with blood, his face turned deathly pale, and he leaped into the water. I lay in his arms, his face turning grim, as I fainted away with a breath as weak as silk.
The child is gone. The consort's body is severely damaged. I'm afraid she will find it difficult to conceive again in the future.
Her Majesty, the Empress, was even more furious. She sent her confidante, Nanny Chin, to the Eastern Palace in person to slap Jiang Lanxin's face 10 times every day. For 7 consecutive days, the once glamorous crown princess was brutally beaten black and blue. Yet her beloved brother, Mu, from beginning to end, never said a single word in her defense. Using my recovery as an excuse, I completely took over the reins of the Eastern Palace. Everyone turned to my side completely. Who would have thought that once the month was up, Jiang Lanxin seemed to become a different person. She became gentle and sensible, hid all her sharp edges, and tried in every way to please Mu Changfeng. Men, after all, always cherish old feelings. The relationship between the two actually began to reignite. Shortly after, a bombshell of news was dropped. Jiang Lanxin was actually pregnant. Mu Changfeng was overjoyed. That was the legitimate son he had dreamed of. He held Jiang Lanxin in the palm of his hand and even threw a grand birthday banquet for her. All the civil and military officials gathered, and the Eastern Palace was decorated with lanterns and streamers, with a grandeur that even eclipsed the Empress. I stood in the corner with a cold sneer. Mu Changfeng, have you forgotten that what the Emperor loathes most is for the Crown Prince to outshine him in influence? At the banquet back then, Jiang Lanxin pointedly and delicately gestured toward the plate of
Phoenix hibiscus cakes. Brother Mu, I want to eat this.
That was my territory, and the pastries were also presented by my own hands. As the silver needle was inserted, it instantly turned pitch black. The entire hall fell dead silent. Jiang Lanxin suddenly threw herself into Mu Changfeng's arms, pointing at me and wailing shrilly.
Consort Lu saw that I am carrying the legitimate heir, and out of jealousy, she wants to poison me and our child to death.
Please, Your Highness, investigate this thoroughly and clear this concubine's name. Within moments, a packet of lethal poison was found in a hidden compartment of my vanity. You've been caught red-handed. The evidence was undeniable. Mu Changfeng looked at the packet of poison, his eyes filled with disappointment and fury. He gritted his teeth and spoke coldly.
Lu Xiyue is venomous and cruel, effective today, demoted to a commoner, and confined to the Fengshi courtyard.
As I passed by Jiang Lanxin, I saw the corners of her mouth twitch into a victorious mocking sneer. She thought she had finally gotten rid of me, but she didn't know that all of this was just another deadly trap I had personally laid. Jiang Lanxin, the show has only just begun. I was locked away in the Fengshi courtyard, becoming the laughingstock of the entire palace. Everyone watched me, eating scraps, washing dirty clothes, and being beaten by the eunuchs. But who could have imagined that this was a death trap I had personally set up? Jiang Lanxin sent people to ruthlessly humiliate me. The maidservants mocked me over the walls. They showed off the luminous pearls sent by the crown prince, mocking me, a mere prisoner. I sat on the cold ground, my heart completely undisturbed. In their eyes, I was a beaten dog, but in my eyes, they were merely short-lived fleas. They thought I had truly lost my power. No, I deliberately walked into the trap just to make her lower her guard. This game has only just begun. It is still unknown who the hunter truly is. Not only do I want her utterly destroyed, but I also want Mu Changfeng to be completely devoted to me, ready to lay down his life for me. On the surface, I am suffering in the laundry department, but in reality, the eunuchs here are all my people. In this deep, forbidden palace, the roots of power have long been tightly intertwined, penetrating every corner. Eating spoiled food is just an act. The gold and silver have already paved my way, and I spent a fortune to hire deadly mercenaries from the underworld, waiting only for a grand show of saving the prince. The outcome of this long-planned plot is about to be revealed. A month later, my opportunity had come. The royal hunt. To save face, Mu Changfeng ventured deep into the forest alone. The sunlight was dappled. Murderous intent suddenly erupted. More than a dozen masked assassins suddenly descended from the sky, unleashing fatal blows. Mu Changfeng was heavily surrounded. His guards were held back, and an assassin's cold blade aimed straight for Mu Changfeng's back. At the critical moment, I lunged out from the grass. The sharp blade pierced through my flesh, and fresh blood instantly stained my plain clothes red. Intense pain swept through my entire body. The sound of the Imperial Guard's horses drew near, and the assassins vanished in an instant. I collapsed into Mu Changfeng's arms. Her face was deathly pale, my breath faint as a thread. I forced myself to reach up and touch his face, speaking in broken gasps, "Your Highness, as long as you are safe." In the next second, my vision went black, and I completely lost consciousness. I slept for 3 days and 3 nights. In my dreams, I intentionally kept calling out, "Your Highness, run, hurry." Mu Changfeng was by the bedside, watched over me until his eyes were bloodshot, his face covered in stubble. His pride was completely gone at this moment. I opened my eyes and looked at him with tears in them, choking up as I said, I had escaped from prison just to see him one last time. I cried and confessed my love to him, my tone humble. "As long as your Highness is safe, I would gladly die." The guilt in Mu Changfeng's heart instantly exploded. He finally recognized his own heart.
"Yuner, I have wronged you. I will never let you."
He held me tightly, his voice raspy. Jiang Lanxin's clumsy schemes were things Mu Changfeng used to just turn a blind eye to, but now, I was the savior who had risked her life to save him, while Jiang Lanxin was just a useless coward shivering in a tent. Who was more important was obvious at a glance. I returned to Xiyue Pavilion, and treasures flooded in like water. Jiang Lanxin was driven mad with rage, cursing frantically in the courtyard like a common shrew. But this was only the beginning. I was going to deal her a fatal blow. After Mu Changfeng left the court, Jiang Lanxin actually brought her people and barged into Xiyue Pavilion. She dragged me by force to the lakeside. I had anticipated this and secretly sent someone to deliver the news. "Let go of me. His Highness will not let you get away with this." Jiang Lanxin laughed manically and ordered the eunuchs to push my head down. A suffocating feeling overwhelmed me as icy lake water choked my lungs, pushed down time after time, and pulled up time after time, just as my consciousness began to fade.
"Stop."
Mu Changfeng rushed over, shoved the crowd aside, and tremblingly held my soaking wet body in his arms. Jiang Lanxin was completely grounded, and all the servants around her were stripped away.
The bright and beautiful woman I once knew will never return.
But as for this affection, I had to add another spark to the fire. That day, I enticed Mu Changfeng to go for a spring outing in the countryside. As the carriage left the city, I feigned panic, saying I had left behind the gift I had personally embroidered for him. softened by my cajoling. Mu Changfeng turned the horse carriage back to the Eastern Palace, passing by the main courtyard. Jiang Lanxin's personal maid, Xiao Kong, her face was deathly pale and tried desperately to stop us. Could it be that something has happened to the Crown Princess?
Humph.
Mu Changfeng's face darkened, and he violently kicked open the door. The air inside the bedroom froze instantly. On the daybed, two people were in an intimate posture, and he looked utterly lost in thought. That guard turned out to be her childhood friend, brought from Mobei.
I was forced. Your Highness, I was forced.
In Mu Changfeng's eyes, there was nothing but raging hatred. He had violated ancestral rules for her, yet she actually gave him a green hat.
Ha ha ha.
Jiang Lanxin simply dropped all pretense and roared hysterically.
You can sleep with other women, so why can't I have other men? This is the price you pay for breaking your oath.
Mu Changfeng trembled with rage, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood as he collapsed to the ground. Jiang Lanxin, you are finally finished. The Crown Princess never expected that the change of heart soup she personally fed to the Crown Prince would actually be a lethal poison. Her personal maid, Xiao Kong, could not withstand the severe torture under interrogation and completely betrayed her. It turned out that in her bid to win his favor, Jiang Lanxin had mistaken poison for an aphrodisiac.
It is the Eastern Palace.
She had promised her maid to make her a concubine, but in the end, she sent herself down a path of no return. Xiao Kong was beaten to death with clubs.
Ha ha ha.
And the once haughty Crown Princess went completely insane. When Mu Changfeng woke up, he looked at the door, at the screaming, delusional woman who babbled about flying together as lovebirds.
Flying together? We must fly together.
His eyes held nothing but cold disgust.
Madwoman.
He turned and walked away, resolutely, without looking back. With a decree of deposition issued, Jiang Lanxin was thrown into Fengxi courtyard. The once haughty Jiang Lanxin became a madwoman, despised by everyone. As for me, finally became the sole mistress of the Eastern Palace. That day, carrying a flask of fine wine, I pushed open the gates of Fengxi courtyard. Amidst a room full of cobwebs, Jiang Lanxin sat with disheveled hair.
You ruined me.
Seeing me enter, hatred instantly flared up in her eyes, and she lunged at the bars like a madwoman. I dismissed my attendants and through the cell door, looking down on her. Even with death staring her in the face, she still refused to back down. She mocked me, saying I was pathetic and that I would never have Mu Changfeng's love. Ha ha ha. I smiled. I smiled so hard that tears almost came to my eyes. Love? Who told you that I love that fool? Giving your heart to a man and begging for affection is the ultimate stupidity. That is why the victor today could only be me. Jiang Lanxin froze in disbelief. I tilted her chin up and told her, emphasizing every single word, my only purpose in entering the Eastern Palaces was to kill you all. At this moment, fear, finally, crept all over her face. Before she could even scream, I forced her jaw open and poured that flask of poisoned wine, poured it right down her throat. She curled up on the ground in agony, vomiting blood, staring at me with deathly hatred until she drew her last breath. But how could that be enough? Letting her die just like this would be far too easy on her. This special wine would only send her into a state of suspended animation. Letting her die just like this would be far too easy on her. Using the body of a death row prisoner prepared in advance, I had her swapped out. As for the real Jiang Lanxin, I slashed her face, severed her tendons, and sent her off to northern desert, to the most notorious military camp. I wanted to make her wish for death, but be unable to die. She would spend the rest of her life paying back 1,000-fold for the pain my sister suffered. My sister's vengeance was half avenged. From then on, it was Mu Changfeng's turn. Their laughable love story spread throughout the capital. The slow poison had already seeped into Mu Changfeng's bones. Little did he know that in the medicine sent to him every day, I had added ingredients to make his flesh rot. I wanted him to experience firsthand the feeling of watching himself turn into rotting muck piece by piece. In just half a month, the bedroom reeked of a foul stench. Mu Changfeng was covered in pus. Seeing me enter, a glimmer of hope flashed in his glassy eyes.
Yuner. Water. Pour me some water.
I stood by the bed with a cold sneer. Your Highness, drinking this water would only be a waste. Why don't you save your breath? His eyes widened in shock. Just as he was about to erupt in anger, he was frozen in place by my next words. Heh. Jiang Lanxin's poison wasn't lethal. What was lethal was what I added. Even the assassins at the hunting grounds were arranged by me. For the downfall of the Eastern Palace, I deserve the utmost credit. He trembled all over, using his very last breath to ask,
But why?
Go down to the underworld and ask Jiang Lanxin. Ask her who that palace maid you beat to death was.
MH.
He struggled violently under the quilt, whimpering, until he went completely still. Pulling back the quilt, his eyes were bulging. Already stone dead, the culprits who killed my sister had finally met their retribution. The world only knew that the deposed crown prince died of a severe illness. When the new emperor ascended the throne, deeply moved by my loyalty, he bestowed upon me countless gold and silver and permitted me to return to my hometown with vast wealth and the remains of my sister and father. I returned to the misty, rainy south. By the lotus pond my sister loved most, I buried them with my own hands. As the spring breeze swept past, the scent of lotus stretched for miles. Sister, look. The lotus grows from the mud, yet remains unstained by dust. For the rest of our lives, I will take in all this beautiful scenery of the south on your behalf.